It's 1990. It's been 2 years since the Iran-Iraq war. Another war is starting. We just got the message that Iraq and Kuwait are in war with each other, the Gulf War. I'm 15 years old. I don't know what to do. I'm sitting with my brothers, my two older brothers, they're twins, and we're sitting and making a plan for what to do with the future. A siege has been set on us. There's no more food, no more electricity, no more fuel. We don't know where to go. People are leaving. They're scared. But we can't go. My mother is sick. She became sick after she gave birth to my youngest brother. My grandparents are also sick. They came all the way from Kirkuk and they can't travel further than this. My uncle, he's also sick. He was a soldier fighting in the Iran-Iraq war, and he unfortunately had to live with all the remnants from that war. He lost his legs, he lost his eyes, but his soul is still intact. We're all sitting here in the dark, and I don't know where to go. We have no light, so we have to do with what we have. So me and my two brothers go into my room, and we light a few candles, and we start talking. What should we do when Mom and Dad die? Because we all knew that's what was to expect. We were still here, we were stuck, and the bombs were not stopping. We had already done every procedure they had told us to do. They were threatening with chemical weapons. There is a siege on us, so we had hoarded a lot of food, making sure that everyone was fed and we wouldn't die of starvation. We might all die due to a bombing. So we sit there and wonder what to do. Our first thought was always to be together. At least we will all die together and know that we had each other. But what would we do if we somehow survived that bombing? What would we do if Mom and Dad were not here? Where would we go? Because we still had nowhere to go. So we set a plan. We had marked every place in the house where there was food. We had marked every place where there was medicine. And we thought maybe, just maybe, we could stick until the end of this war. I don't know what to do. I am still stuck here. I try to not lose hope. I try to think that maybe there's something greater left. But I have to be honest, there's no hope left. I know I won't survive, and I know I will die, and I know I will be forgotten.
It was the year of 1991. The world was in frenzy. We were supposed to run away because we had heard soldiers were coming. We heard that people would get killed, people would get raped. We were supposed to run all the way from Suleimania to the borders of Iran. We were supposed to run up the mountains with whatever we could gather with us, and we had to take the whole family. And we couldn't wait for even a second. We couldn't pack that much, and it would be a very long trip, so we had to take whatever necessary we could take with us. It was March. It was raining. I remember it was raining heavily, and it was so cold, and I didn't have clothes for this. We had nothing, not even an umbrella. And I had my grandpa, my blind grandpa. He was so sick, and we had to somehow take him up with us, up to this mountain. We were heading to this city in Iran called Sakaz. There will be some refugee camps where we would stay. The way up there was dark, rainy, and very cold. It was impossible to navigate through the darkness. We had to wait and let my brothers and my father find out where else to go. Most often, I would wait with my brother and my blind grandpa until everyone came back. I remember very vividly one of these times when it was completely dark out, and my parents and my other siblings went around to look for a better hideout. They were looking for a camp, for a person, for food, for whatever. It was so cold and it was dark. I kept on holding on to my grandpa because I was scared he would feel as scared as me. And every now and then I would call out my brother's name to make sure he's still alive or that he still is there. Because in the darkness you will have many bad ideas. When we arrived to the camp, at last, my grandpa had to go. My father said he was a dead weight. We couldn't take care of ourselves, let alone a sick, old and blind man. And the Iranians said that they would take him to a hospital to take care of him. So my father pressured me to let my grandpa go. They shipped him off against my screams into a car to a hospital in this city. And I didn't know what to do without my grandpa or how lonely my grandpa was. A few days later, it hit my father how he threw his own father away out of fear. Guilt trapped him. He took my brother and scavenged every hospital in the close cities looking for my grandpa. But they couldn't find him. There were no traces of him. My grandpa was gone, and we all lived with the guilt, that bad dhamir that kept coming at us. We stayed there at this camp for 5 months. When we got home, my world had changed.
So the stories you just heard were retellings of our mother's stories, who both lived through the same wars at the same time. And it's a reminder that a lot of hurt happens and a lot of things stay with you and stick with you from war, and how it's so difficult to have amal, to have hope when you live through these things. We were lucky. We wouldn't have been here. We wouldn't have sat on the sofa if it was not for them being strong and surviving.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for them being forgiving towards the people that hurt them many years ago, I still think that they don't tell us the full truth.
No.
I don't think they will ever tell us, but we can sometimes hear it when our parents cry or my mom's voice goes soft and she says that I don't think we should talk about this anymore. For my mom, her grandpa was one of the most influential people in her life. Every time anyone mentions his name, she starts crying. And I also think till this day or till the day she's alive, as she says, she'll feel guilty for not holding on to him. I left out a lot of the story. I think a lot of it was heavy stuff that she probably wouldn't have liked us to know more about, because some of the stuff that they go through, there is no psychologist that can help them through it. And as stupid as I am, I asked her, I was like, when you got back down to the city, did anyone sit down with you guys and do like a trauma talk to you, or like, you know, because they do also have doctors there, they do have psychiatrists and everything. And I was wondering if anyone that lived in that situation, that was educated in trauma and stuff, did talk to them. And she's like, there exists no such thing. And we were all in an alarmed, shocked state. And also years later, no one would dare to go to a psychologist or to a psychiatrist or anything, because you are not crazy. You are just a person who goes through a lot of shit like everyone else in the country. You just have to survive.
Imagine our mothers, for example, they had lived through 2 consecutive wars followed by a civil war in the span of 10 years. That's crazy. In the span of 10 years, they lived through 2 wars, and then give it a bit more, like 12 years, and was also a civil war added onto that. Killing, death was their normal everyday life.
Yeah, I would think that you would get desensitized at one point, because, I mean, but also the thing is, I think we don't understand, but everyone went through this. So her friends went through this, her siblings, the teachers, the doctors. She said that one night when her parents left to look for whatever that could get them out of that darkness, there was no light, there was no lamp, and she and her brother was so worried their grandpa would die. They started gathering the cardboards that were lying around from other previous people, whatever rugs they could find from people who had already left, they put it on top of him. And she said, I kept a hand on his torso at all times to keep him warm. She told me, what if they never came back, my parents, and they left us to die? And then she kept on every now and then shouting her brother's name, just making sure he's alive or he didn't leave her, or what are we supposed. It's just, how do you even put that in a movie? Like, there is like, you cannot go through these emotions in any way.
And I think these feelings, they stick with them now as well. This feeling of, are my loved ones still there? I remember every time I travel and I come back, my dad is always like, and I've traveled like a lot of times, and sometimes it's just, going to another city in Denmark. And he'll be like, but you're far away. I never know what will happen. I need to be sure that you're alive. I'm like, why is this worry? I never worry if you guys go anywhere, because it is this life of privilege we have lived that everyone around us are always safe. We don't think, what if a plane comes and bombs them? That's not a thought we have. We don't think like that.
Also, the anxiety. My mom said, this is the first time I actually heard from her, but she said today, when the thing happened where she was so reliant on her brothers and sisters and parents being there, because if they disappeared, she would be dead by herself, because she didn't have anything. There was no phones, there was no Google Maps, there was nothing. And she said, like, after being there and being so dependent on people, when she got back from the mountains back into the real city and the world, she did not find peace in being alone. She freaked out the moment she was alone. She would get anxiety attacks and she would think like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. And I grew up my whole life with my mom teaching me to be independent. If I asked her for anything, she would be like, if you want this, go over there, do this and this and this. So the fact that she taught me independence and she was so scared for so long just shows that these people, I don't know how they made it, but they made it, overcoming their biggest fear and somehow still not getting it treated, because there must be an underlying nightmare going on every now and then.
And that brings me to the next point, and what this podcast episode is going to be circulated around. Right now, a lot of bad things are happening in the world and a lot of people are suffering. And even though we have lived a safe life, we have never been shy of knowing that this has happened in the world. We have always followed along. I don't know how it was for you, but I think for me, always we knew about the wars. We knew about what was happening in the world. I was born in 97. I still remember the Iraq war. I was a child, but I heard it. They were talking about it. They were always observant about it. And everything that's going on in Palestine right now, we are following along. We're watching. And then this thing happens to us who are born here in the diaspora, and that is the heavy, heavy feeling of survivor's guilt. And this is this heavy feeling of, what did I do to deserve this? This heavy feeling where every crumb I eat with guilt these days. Every drop of water I drink with guilt. Especially these last 2 weeks. Because war has always happened, but this time it's to such an extent, and we're following along. We live in a digital age. We see it, we hear them, we watch them.
And you can feel them screaming in your ear every day, don't you?
Exactly. It's running through my mind 24/7. Even when I try to kind of detach, also, what a privilege to be able to detach from a conflict, a war. It's not none of those things, these genocide happenings. A moment that we're able to detach from that is such a privilege. We're able to just close our phones and go about our days. But even in those moments where I think this has become too much, because now it's 2 a.m. and I have work in the morning and I have cried all the tears I can, I turn off the phone and it's still replaying in my mind. And I go to work, and even the other day, I wasn't thinking I was going to update myself on where everything has gone. And I see this story of this newly married couple where the wife died, and the wife's name was Danya, and it's the same name as my sister. And I was just filled with this heavy grief reading these slides about this girl named Danya. And I broke down, and all I could think about was how lucky I am that my Danya is intact, but there's someone else who just lost theirs. And this feeling that
I wish I could do more. I wish I could do more than just speak up and repost, but there's nothing you can do. Even the money you donate, the help does not go in. What will you do? You can sit here and scream your voice out, and it's doing nothing. And so you sit behind and you eat those crumbs with guilt, and you don't want to eat anymore because you're thinking about those children, you're thinking about those women, and you're also just thinking about the innocent people.
I think also the fact that you know that those people that are suffering are the same people like your parents that went through that. So it's like you're seeing these people and you're feeling that history is repeating itself and you can do nothing about it. It's also because we are doctors, because we care for humans. That's the reason we do our job. Not being able to save someone because it's out of our hands, it's something political, it's something economical, it's something geographical. There are so many components in this, and the only thing we want is to go and get that kid and that mom and that dad and the siblings and the neighbors and the friends and just save them. And where are you gonna go with this? How can you do this? Because we don't have any powers at all. And when I talk to my mom and I'm like, where is your hope from? Why did you survive? Why didn't you and your friends just die after what happened? What made you believe in the world? And she was like, you know what? I will never forget. I am a victim forever. But we need to remember that the civilians are good, but the people in power, they should have used their power in a different way. And they should have been the ones taking care of us and not getting us murdered and killed. And that's the sad part, because we're also civilians. We don't have power.
It's so hopeless. It's just hopeless. You feel so empty for some reason. I have 0 Palestinian blood in me. You also have 0, but it's not about that. It's about humanity. It's about the fact, and especially being of Middle Eastern descent, doesn't matter for Kurdish, Turkmen, Arab, everyone from that region, doesn't even matter your religion. Just being Middle Eastern, having that label of Arab, having that label of aggression, I see how the media portrays them, which frustrates me even more, because I know if my mom did not get out of there and I was born there and a war started in Iraq, I know how the world would react, and that pains me even more. The fact that I would not matter. Nobody would care. Nobody would care because we look the way we look and we come from the descendants that we have. You do feel hopeless for a better world. It's like at times like this, the universe just works against us. We're not given a voice.
I guess love is not a currency. That solves very well.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's not.
Yeah.
Love is not.
And I think also it's very sad to say this, but warfare and war and all of this is also a very great business. We know from the history books we learned, or what we read in school, that how our teacher was like, don't forget this, but weapons and exchange of all of these war information, all of this, they are products that are selling very good. And when you think about it, how ridiculous it is that someone's death or some people's death are economically beneficial for a company. That's so crazy. In my head, I'm like, okay, so if this is how it works, then, I mean, humans mean nothing to each other. My mom's grandpa died for someone to have a few dollars.
Yeah. That is the sad, horrific, grim truth of this. That is the sad, horrific truth. And I have always, told myself that I'm someone who believes in hope, who believes in love, who believes in, goodness, and everybody loves each other. But the grim truth is, when money and power gets involved, it's only the ones at the top that will benefit, and everybody else are not worthy. We are deemed second-class humans.
The Middle East have gone through so much wars, and they haven't had like a break of just having to go through some sort of therapy or treatment, because I think if you live on your trauma and you sleep badly, you eat badly, I mean, what kind of a human are we trying to produce? Imagine a kid not having hope. Children always have hope. So if you take that away, then what is left in that area?
And they are hopeless. I was watching this documentary, which I recommend everybody watch. It's called Born in Gaza, and it's on Netflix. And these children have zero hope left in life. They have no hope. They know that their life is done for. These are not circumstances children need to grow up in. But what I do have one string of hope left. And that string of hope is that we've seen in history that liberation has happened, that the power of the people is still a thing. And I think we, as children in the diaspora, as children with Middle Eastern descent, and humans in general, actually, we have that great privilege of being in the digital age. I open my phone. I'm not politically inclined. I don't do political science at uni. I don't read these heavy books. I did what I had to do for high school, and that's all. But we are so able to educate ourselves. We don't need a library. We can look up the books as ebooks. We can look at the stats. Everything is online. We can make a decision for ourselves, and we can listen to the voices who are being heard. We can listen and we can view, and we have all the data. Before, back in history, for example, with the Indonesian slave trade to South Africa, I didn't know about that. I knew about it now because I read a book about it, and then I Googled it, and all of the stats are up there. Back then, do you think people in Iraq knew this was happening? No. Do you think people in Turkey knew this was happening? No. They had their own things to care about. But right now, in our safety, in our comfort, we are able to educate ourselves. We are able to kind of look at every conflict and have our opinion on it, and we are able to voice our opinions. Many people might feel like, well, my Instagram, I only have like 100 followers. Who even cares what I have to say? But I'm telling you, the amount of knowledge I get from seeing what other people post, it's incredible. I learn so much, and it's like wildfire, because humans, even though the civilians, we do not have the money, even though we do not have the power, but we have power in numbers. That is how in South Africa apartheid ended. That is what Martin Luther King speaked on, which, by the way, they labeled Martin Luther King as a terrorist. They tried to use words also against him. And every black person who lived in South Africa, they tried to use words that would dehumanize them, but there was power in people, there was power in numbers. And I hold the string of hope that if we all stand together and make a stance and make it publicly known, we can do a lot. We can contact our local government and be like, listen, you have a voice. We need to use your voice. We need to threaten with pulling our votes away from them. Because at the end of the day, as I said, we live in a democracy. There is power in numbers. We can do that. We can go and donate to all the NGOs that support the people who are hurting. We can, and again, the last thing we can do is just spread the word. Because do you not ever think that, what if I lived at the time when these bad things were happening in the world, when apartheid was happening in South Africa, when the wars were happening? I always think, what would I do? What would I do as Dunya living in Copenhagen? Would I do anything? Would I say anything?
All these small voices turn into one big shout at the end of the day. I want to also say that I hope that we from this generation make it clear that violence is not the way to go, that we can have academical discussions instead of doing warfare, because we are paying like all this money that goes to the weapon industry should have been used on other things, should have been used on rebuilding a place, feeding people, giving people education, treating their traumas. I mean, Mother Nature would need nurture after all these ruins that people are doing. I mean, there is so much we can use, and I think only the new generation, the young generation, can work on this. Yes. Because there's no dispute about this inhumanity going on, and we need to shout, of course, every day to make sure someone at some point listens. Maybe we will commonly make this stop, but I'm thinking at the end of the day we need to also have a solution so that this doesn't happen again.
But do you think we have the power to bring solution? Do you think we, for example, us two, what do you think we can do to resolve this? Do you think I should call up Biden? I don't. What can we do? We can't do anything.
No, I think, of course, we need to continue, like, after all of this is happening. I think people need to, just like how after the Second World War, they figured out, like, let's not do this again. This was a terrible idea. And I think the same way after this inhumane war that is going on, we need to stop. We're clearly not learning anything from killing each other as humans. And we need to stop doing this because every human being is worth the same. And I'm really sad that the hurt keeps going on, although everyone in the world keeps screaming, stop it. Because it's not only the Middle East saying that, it's not only the few people in Gaza that's saying, please stop. And it's not only the healthcare workers that are screaming, stop. Everyone in the world is saying, stop. And I think we need to make sure that this never happens again.
Yeah, it's not stopping. And even a horror movie would not be this grim. And I have to emphasize that the way these casualties are going, the death toll and the aggression that is being used is, we all know it's heavy on one side. They deserve to be free in their own country. Imagine if you are a refugee in your own country. That's absurd. Have you ever heard of that?
I'm very scared this is going to turn into we hate each other again.
No.
Because this war will make people even more, like polarized about certain things, and certain people will feel this way and certain people will feel that way. And the people in the middle that are hurt and ruined and violently killed, they're like, even in heaven, they will not get peace. But what I want to say is that my mom said what she really, really was sad about is that the government, after certain war outbreaks, didn't take the liberty or the time to tell their people, we made a mistake, we shouldn't have done this. But instead they kept on polarizing and telling the people and using propaganda to tell their people to hate the neighboring country that they attacked, and vice versa. But I think people would really love that if they knew that all these stereotypes we have of each other, all these, I don't know where people get, like, how this happened, but this way of thinking about certain people, like if that just was removed and we start a blank white page, I kid you, we will cry for days and months and hugging each other and thinking, why the hell did we start this to begin with?
But I see that happening. I see another thing I learned with this going on right now. First of all, whenever you speak of something like the Palestine-Israel conflict, there's always this fear of, I don't want to speak up about it because it's complicated. First of all, it's not complicated, but let's not get into that. It's not a political podcast. But I have seen that because we live in a digital age, people are able to educate themselves. There's this organization in the USA called Jewish Voice for Peace, which I love that organization. They are the ones who came up with the Not in Our Name slogan. Because when you look at a conflict, there is a side that's hurting. There is an oppressor and there is a victim, which is why it's not okay to actually call it a conflict, because then it would be equal and like we're battling it out. There is an oppressor and there is a victim in the scenario. And most of us fear to speak up because we don't want to seem like, especially when you're Arab, especially when you're Muslim, and especially when you're in a working place, when you are surrounded by people who clearly follow the classic news, which shows that Arabs are bad. People are not defined by their religion. They're not defined by the few bad apples that exist. People have humanity. That is what gives me a string of hope.
But it's very complicated. The Middle East is not just one population.
No.
Within one country, there is like a million minorities. Like me and you, we are different minorities, but we coexist. And I think like at some point there has been also problems between our minorities, and I didn't even know about that. And at the same time, my mom was like, I grew up with Turkmen. They were like my family. So it's just like, it's so complicated. I guess like if this was a show, it would be a telenovela. You would never know what the next scene would be. And every scene would make you as shocked as the other. What I think our last message should be is that listen to the voices of the hurt people and erase the bad stereotypes and the bad stuff you hear about people. Unless you are their best friend, don't just assume you know who these people are. Because I mean, like, you wouldn't judge anyone you don't know yet. I know we love stereotypes as people, and sometimes it's comic, but certain stereotypes are deadly. If you make someone your enemy and show that to them, how do you think they're gonna be your friend? They will also go into defend mode and be like, you know what, well then you're also my enemy. And then we'll end up in a non-finished war with each other forever.
Yeah, and I think another last message I want to bring is detach from what you have known, detach from what you have been taught, educate yourself, read up on credible sources, read up on the people who are speaking out, make your own opinion and act upon that. Raise your voice, because as we said, there's power in numbers. Donate when you can. Keep people in your prayers. It's difficult these times for everyone, and we might feel overwhelmed, but we will never feel as overwhelmed as those who are on the ground right now being physically hurt. And I wish and hope for a world with peace.
Stay hopeful, and remember, as long as we stay together, there will be no one getting in harm. مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.